with that explanation, which they thought was
Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Institute. I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Institute, and I'm happy to welcome you to our Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. If you miss a day of the news, you have missed a lot of exciting things, and this has been true every day for the past couple of weeks. Staggering things that are happening. Enough enough news probably to fill a week or a month of ordinary news coverage, and and what's happening from the conservative viewpoint, I think, is quite beneficial, wonderfully. And there is, I think, in living memory, there's only one other president who has created such dramatic changes as President Trump has changed. And of course, that was Franklin Roosevelt, who was elected in 1932. Franklin Roosevelt was extraordinarily active. I was not born yet. There were things that happened before I was born, and the enormous changes which he made focused on 100 days. Well, I truly think that it's an interesting thing that Trump has done. I think as much dramatic stuff, but in 2 weeks as Roosevelt did in his 100 days. And the other thing that makes this interesting is that the left has for generations been working to increase the power of the federal government, increase the power of the executive branch, giving all kinds of additional powers to the president, and all of those powers are now in the hands of Donald Trump. I encourage you to live tweet today's events. The hashtag is on the screen there. In 2024, your Leadership Institute trained more than 43,000 conservatives at more than 3,000 separate training programs. Since 1979, the Institute has trained over 332,000 activists, students, and leaders. And you have before you the redesigned schedule of events that are upcoming now at the Leadership Institute. And I urge you to take a moment to review these schools and to consider attending one of them or sending a friend to one of our trainings. If you are watching online, you can visit our website at leadershipinstitute.org/training to see the upcoming online and in-person trainings. Now my pleasure to introduce to you Nathan Myers. Nathan is from Overland Park, Kansas. He graduated from Benedictine College in December of last year. He got his degree in economics and political science. His interests include political analysis, foreign affairs, intelligence, economics, and political theory. You have come to the right place here, Nathan. He previously interned at the Institute of World Politics, a fine organization that works often with the Leadership Institute. Nathan has participated in previous trainings with the Leadership Institute, such as our National Youth Leadership School in Washington in 2023. He is excited to intern at the Leadership Institute and would like to stay in Washington, D.C. afterwards to establish his career, so you might ask him for a resume. Is our advanced School of Politics intern. Would you come, please, and lead us invocation and Pledge of Allegiance? Let me gracefully step back here, as gracefully as possible. Okay, Nathan, step up.
Thank you so much. Well, it is good being here today. And Pledge of Allegiance. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God, in your infinite goodness, bless this breakfast today. Bless us all today. Please, in your name, we just in general pray for just into suffering, pray for an end, for peace in the Middle East, and pray for peace in Ukraine. Pray that we can all get established. Pray that we can all find goodness in our lives, goodness in each other. Pray for an end to lots of just in general, just suffering in our lives. Pray that our politicians lead us well, and just in general, pray that we have a good day today. In your name we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from evil. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. And pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Next, I introduce to you Amanda Spears. She's going to give a brief program report for the Institute. She is our Institute's Christian Leadership Program Manager. That's one of our newer projects, and it's drawing a lot of attention. She travels to college campuses across the country to identify talented Christian students on these campuses and recruit them for mentorship by the Amanda connects these students with training, networking, internship, and job opportunities throughout the conservative and Christian movements, helping them to take advantage of the opportunities presented to them and to develop them into future Christian conservative leaders. Previously, Amanda was Senior Regional Field Coordinator in our Leadership Institute's Campus Leadership Program. She came to the Leadership Institute as an intern in our Youth Leadership School department. There she helped organize training programs that teach students their skills to become successful youth organizers. Amanda was homeschooled throughout high school and is now attending Liberty University online, working toward a degree in business management. She has a background working with churches across denominations in various capacities and volunteering at ministry conferences across the United States, in the marketplace, and in Amanda is in youth ministry at her home church in D.C. Let's step up, please, Amanda.
Thank you, Morton. I'm excited to tell you guys about our Christian Leaders Program, which is a newer program here at Leadership Institute. The program exists to empower Christian students with resources and mentorship to engage meaningfully with the political process. Through training, one-on-ones, and also scholarships to different events throughout the conservative movement, we have been able to train and encourage a lot of Christian students and help place them in internships throughout the DC Christian and conservative movements. 2 weekends ago, the Christian Leaders Program hosted 51 students for the March for Life all across the country. They were able to stay here in our dorms at Leadership Institute. Students kicked off the weekend with a breakfast and sign-making training before heading downtown to brave the cold at the annual March for Life. This year, they were really excited to hear from our Vice President, J.D. Vance, and President Donald Trump at the rally. And then afterwards, they were able to attend the National Students for Life Pro-Life Summit, also here in D.C. We are also very excited to start planning our annual Statesman Conference, which will be at the end of May this year, and where we have students from all over the country come and get professional development opportunities, as well as attend different tours around the city, such as the Bible Museum, the Capitol, and help get them networked into the conservative movement. We're looking forward to a full year of programming, and if you know any students who would be interested, whether college or end of high school, you can check out the program at our website. Thank you.
Thank you. And now to introduce our speaker, I present to you Logan Breaksley. He's going to introduce Tim Goeglein. Logan is from Binghamton, New York. He's a recent graduate of Binghamton University, where he studied history and political science. His first job was an internship in the New York State Senate, and Logan was the longest-serving vice president of the Binghamton University College Republicans, while he also served almost 3 years as a student Congress representative. Logan worked tirelessly to support conservative and Jewish students on his campus from harassment and discrimination in the terrible things that happened recently on campus. He also successfully implemented the Chicago Statement, a statement of support for free speech in his student government. Logan attended a variety of conservative and libertarian conferences such as CPAC, Revolution of Young Americans for Liberty, and the ARC. Currently, he is my intern here at the Leadership Institute. Logan, please introduce our speaker. And then let me get these things in order and step down with as much grace as I can. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Tim Goeglein champions God's welcomed role in the public square. His years of public service and private initiative have been devoted to faith, freedom, and family. Currently, he is the Vice President for External and Government Relations at Focus on the Family in Washington, D.C. For 2 decades, he served in high-level government posts, including as Special Assistant to President George W. Bush from 2001 to 2008, and as Deputy Press Secretary and Communications Director for U.S. Senator Dan Coates of Indiana from 1988 to 1998. He also served as a Senior Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Professor of Government at Liberty University, and as a member of several conservative boards, Coalitions for America, the National Civic Art Society, Family Policy Alliance, and Young America's Foundation. Tim is the author of several books, including his newest, Stumbling Toward Utopia, How the 1960s Turned into a National Nightmare, and How We Can Revive the American Dream. He holds honorary doctorate degrees from Concordia University, New York City, and from Faith Evangelical College and Seminary, Tacoma, Washington. Additionally, Tim serves both at his Lutheran Church in Northern Virginia and in his denomination at large. Outside of work, Tim enjoys reading, tennis, swimming, biking, and the fine arts. The most important thing to know about Tim is that he is married to the love of his life, Jenny, of 31 years, and they have 2 sons, Tim and Paul, one in public policy and one in the fine arts and music. Please remember to hold all questions until a microphone is brought to you at the end of the speech. This helps ensure our online viewers can hear all questions from the audience. Now, if you can all join me to warmly welcome Tim Goeglein.
Thank you, Logan. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Amanda, the ever great Morton Blackwell, who I feel like I've known forever. I just turned 61, which means that I've known you since I was 20 years old. You keep staying the same age, and I get just a little older. And of course, KJ and the really wonderful team, Kathy, Steve, etc., at Leadership Institute. I was mentioning to my new friend Logan this morning and to another in the green room, and I know Morton knows this, but with only the exception of COVID, by the way, not because I chose it or that Leadership Institute chose it, but because the powers that be chose it, but with only the exception of COVID, I have spoken in the Sacker House program with no breaks for 27 years, 3 times a year. And it has been one of the truly great things of my life. So as we commence year 28, I'm here, ready to go, and look forward to all of those Sacker House students, many of whom now married, children, one with grandchildren, doing great things in our country. One of the things, if I may say, as one of the vice presidents at Focus on the Family, I know that I have come exactly to the right spot. If before it's even 10 o'clock in the morning, we've had the Lord's Prayer for a young man from Benedictine College. We've heard a wonderful report on Christian conservative outreach from my fellow Liberty University person. Logan wouldn't know this, but my wife grew up in Binghamton, New York. And of course, whenever you have breakfast with Morton Blackwell, you know that it's the right spot. I have, as Logan so graciously said, lived and worked in Washington for almost 4 decades, which is to say I was an intern for the first time in the summer of 1985 for Dan Quayle of Indiana, who I was just with in Phoenix. By the way, I was speaking, Morton, to a large group at a large public university in Arizona in Phoenix, and I mentioned Dan Quayle as vice president, and there wasn't a single person in the room who knew he'd ever been vice president, which goes to book 3, Toward a More Perfect Union, which I spoke about here. What are the implications of cultural illiteracy? And we can talk about that more. And then the next summer for Dan Coates of Indiana when he was in the House, and for Tim Russert and Roger Mudd on the weekends at NBC News here in Washington. And as Providence would have it, 10 years in the U.S. Senate for Dan Coates of Indiana, 8 years at the White House for George W. Bush, and the last 16 as one of the vice presidents for Focus on the Family here in Washington. And I think it is fair to say, Morton, that in all of that time, all of it together, that with all the speaking, meeting, presenting, researching, writing, all the things that all of us in this room love to do, that in the last 3 years, whether I am in Berkeley, California, or in Portland, Maine, whether I'm in Miami-Dade County or the Twin Cities, whether the audience is left wing, right wing, no wing, whatever, that after you offer a set of remarks with pinpoint accuracy, and I'm not even a betting man, but with pinpoint accuracy, someone will raise his or her hand. We can say his or her again. Just look at the executive order. And with pinpoint predictability, will say something like, how in the world did we get into this mess? And I think it is fair to say, for almost any other epoch of American history, if a speaker were asked that question, he or she would be honor bound to say, tell me more what you mean. I want to answer your question. But in the era that we are in, we all, the collective we know precisely what that person is asking. It's a version of Wokeistan, erasure culture, inverted reality, etc. I spoke at Williams College a year and a half ago, and I was told that before I could speak, I had to fill out the application with my preferred pronouns. And I said, I really don't need to fill out that part of the application. And I thought to myself, why am I debating an otherwise person of goodwill who knows that I don't need to answer that question? And this is a mini version. And by the way, we have 3 generations in this wonderful room this morning represented. Again, back to the royal we all know of what we speak. And we have lived through this Orwellian dystopia. And we all know that the political class cannot resolve this. We all know as conservatives that culture leads. And so after 3 years of hearing this recurring question, how did we get into this mess? And Morton, you can't make this up, but I was getting on the airplane in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had just taken off, and I asked the steward for a stack of what must have been the smallest cocktail napkins ever in human history, right? These tiny little squares. And I began to outline Stumbling Toward Utopia. I began to outline the book that I pray that you and your 50,000 best friends will buy and read, to answer the question, how in the world did we get into this mess? And I'm very pleased to say, by God's grace alone, that the book is doing exceptionally well, because I think that the narrative is strong. The more reading, the more research that I did, I found that the answer of how we got into this mess is called the 1960s. Right. And what I learned in all of my reading and in all of my research was that the 1960s did not begin in the 1960s. Okay? And so briefly, because I know you'll all buy and read the book, I'd like to give a blush on the narrative. And here's what I found. The more that I researched and read, the more that I found that if you want to ask where the 1960s came from, you have to look directly at the turn of the 20th century. And there were a handful of very influential, very powerful Americans, not overstating this, by the way. I went back and read overwhelmingly what they wrote and what they said and looked at what they did. But this group of people I'm telling you about who gave to us, by and large, the 1960s, were people at the turn of the 20th century who did not like the United States of America. By the way, hand over heart, do not take my word for this. Go back yourselves. Look and read the speeches. Look and read at what they wrote. They were very candid about what I've just said. Now, in the interest of time today, I'd like to give you a few snapshots of the architects and creators of the 1960s. And I want to begin with Woodrow Wilson, right? This is a man who was the president of Princeton University. He became the governor of New Jersey. And in the most unlikely way possible, which I delineate in the book, he became the president of the United States of America. And even though he was the president, he was extremely uncomfortable with the United States Constitution. He was very uncomfortable with the Declaration of Independence. By the way, we're coming up to the 250th celebration. Not demarcation, celebration, right? Wilson wrote at length about the faltering nature of the Declaration of Independence. By the way, are you ready for this? He was preoccupied with the idea that the three branches of government was a broken model. Checks and balances out the window, right? He saw himself as the American prime minister. And are you ready for this? You can't make it up. Ready for the 1960s? This is where cat's paws sneak in. Wilson thought that it would be better if we would do away with citizen sovereignty in the United States and have an expert run. Sound familiar? He said, let's let the experts run the United States of America. This is a true foreshadowing of the moral and social revolution of the 1960s and 70s. Woodrow Wilson sought to change the political class, and he succeeded. I want to use another example, if I may. The founder of the American, any street in Arlington, Washington, pick your city, and you said, who is Roger Baldwin? The overwhelming majority of Americans would not know. But if you want to answer the question, how did we get into this mess? Read Stumbling Toward Utopia, because you're going to meet Roger Baldwin, the founder of the ACLU. By the way, he was a very committed communist. He was extremely uncomfortable with the idea of the American legal system. He felt that we needed to redefine. How about this? Are you ready for this? We needed to reimagine, like that word? We need to reimagine the idea of the meaning of American justice. And I'm very sorry to say, even as an inveterate optimist, that the ACLU and their legal utopian radical social engineers fundamentally recalibrated the American judicial system, resulting, by the way, in some of the catastrophic decisions that were seeded and later germinated with the Warren Court of the 1960s. By the way, you all may recall that Dwight David Eisenhower was asked, do you have any regrets? And he said after 8 years in the presidency, yes, I have 2 of them, and they're both sitting on the United States Supreme Court. By the way, let this be a warning to we conservatives. He was referring to Earl Warren, the former Republican governor of California, and William J. Brennan, a little-known New Jersey, there's that state again, New Jersey Republican. Here's another one. Do you all know the name Margaret Sanger? Yes. By the way, if there's one thing that Stumbling Toward Utopia makes crystalline, is that you cannot understand the absolute human devastation of the 1960s and 70s without understanding the profound moral revolution that the utopians and progressives foisted upon our nation, taking to the idea of the natural nuclear family. By the way, with Wilson, with Baldwin, with Margaret Sanger, the principal creator of the sexual revolution, an abortion fanatic, a person who was a eugenicist, a person who was a racialist to the core, a person who really disliked Roman Catholics and the immigrant stock of the United States of America, a person who used her incredible power and influence to impact Protestant mainline and to help hollow out the idea of biblical orthodoxy or theology and to replace it with a progressivism on steroids. I could go on and on about the devastation of so-called Planned Parenthood. Now that we are in 2025, Roe versus Wade foisted on our country in 1973, I know most of you are sitting down, 70 million abortions in the United States just since 1973. If that's not the... By the way, another figure who, and I know that I'm at the Leadership Institute, who deserves far more attention is the devastating impact of John Dewey and the other social engineers who were extremely uncomfortable with the concept of right and wrong, good and evil, as the principal purposes of education in the American experience. And John Dewey and the radical education so-called reformers using the University of Chicago, Columbia University, using all of that to fundamentally transform the concept of American education, the classroom, basic learning, K through 12, all through the higher education. And then, above all, using higher education as a truncheon against the United States. By the way, everything I'm sharing with you is objectively the case. These people knew what they were doing, and they were very powerful, they were very influential, and they were very well funded. They overtook almost all of America's greatest institutions and remade them. By the way, in Stumbling Toward Utopia, I spend time looking at the Port Huron Statement. Now, I know it's breakfast, and it's, as I say, not even 10 a.m. The Port Huron Statement, what is that? The Port Huron Statement is something that should be on the tip of the tongue of every American conservative, because the Port Huron Statement is the seedbed of the radicalization of the campuses in the 1960s and 70s. It was the blueprint and remains the blueprint for the way that the left proactively, not responsibly, proactively turned the American higher education system quite literally upside down. All of the campus protests, all the neo-Marxism. Morton mentioned a moment ago the horrific campus anti-Semitism. I had to be in Morningside Heights, up at Columbia University, at the height of the resurgence of anti-Semitism. This is Columbia University. This is the United States of America. That's the Upper West Side of New York City, and you couldn't get onto the campus. What in the world was going on? I'll answer that. A resurgence of the 1960s. By the way, these people get up every single day, Morton, and they want it to be 1968 again. Somewhere the mamas and the papas, somewhere Woodstock, smack, acid, it's all there. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Drive it into the ground, whether it's your country or not. By the way, in Stumbling Toward Utopia, I definitely take a look at Woodstock. Woodstock, as Morton well remembers, Woodstock was held up as the apotheosis of American public culture, of where we were supposed to go. People being shot in the mud, human beings rolling around like animals, selling acid and illegal drugs everywhere. This is in upstate New York. By the way, as you'll see on the cover of Stumbling Toward Utopia, by the way, I had an embarrassment of riches of photos that I could have chosen from. I chose the figure in the center of Stumbling Toward Utopia of Che Guevara. Che Guevara. By the way, one other thing that I wanted to look at, we're Americans. We love music. We love the movies. We love television. I wanted to show the direct impact of the Cultural Revolution on how, for instance, American sitcoms were turned upside down. I didn't come to breakfast this morning to say that Leave It to Beaver is the greatest television there ever was, okay? But on the other hand, we all still know Leave It to Beaver, okay? What I show in Stumbling Toward Utopia is how the new morality took pretty holistic, wholesome entertainment and completely rooted it and bathed it in a new cynicism, skepticism, and even a dehumanization. It is possible that the most influential, popular cultural figure in American television history was Norman Lear. He's a long way from Leave It to Beaver. Americans tuning in after a hard day at the office to laugh at something pretty forgettable, and the next thing you know, we're supposed to laugh at anti-Semitism and bigotry. Do you all know the show Maude? Do you know this name, this creation of Norman Lear? Holding up abortion for the first time as funny. Did you all get the memo? Right? By the way, there was irony, bitter irony, even in Norman Lear's success, as I show in Stumbling Toward Utopia, that the entire country was supposed to hate Archie Bunker. This was a man, I mean, isn't it rip-roaringly funny that in the devastation of Vietnam, he still loved the United States of America and thought that freedom should prevail over tyranny? I mean, isn't that rip-roaringly funny that as Richard Nixon, is being thrown from office, that Archie Bunker still thinks there's something worthy in Richard Nixon because he's a human being? You know, I was in a debate about this part of Stumbling Toward Utopia around Christmas time, and my progressive interlocutor said, "Don't tell me that you're going to come to this stage and defend Archie Bunker." And I said, no, I'm coming to this stage to ask you, my interlocutor, do you think it's possible in another chapter of American history that Archie Bunker may have voted for Franklin Roosevelt 4 times? Because that, I said to him, was another Democratic Party. And I'm very happy to say I rendered an otherwise loquacious person silent. Yeah. There's plenty more, by the way, and I want to close on 2 points. One, I mentioned I love the movies, because I do. I think the movies of the golden era of Hollywood, the 30s, 40s, and 50s, those will still be considered great movies 100 years from now, right? But when, because of the moral revolution of the 60s, when the production code was ripped up root and branch from Hollywood, it would have been unthinkable. And I mean this. It would have been unthinkable for great actors, actresses, producers, directors, by the way, of both political parties. Let's remember, Ronald Reagan supported Franklin Roosevelt 4 times, right? Let's not do what the left does, revisionism. But when the Hollywood production code was ripped up and tossed away, as soon as 1969, an X-rated movie was called the Movie of the Year and given the Academy Award. This is how fast the cancer and the malevolence of the left is able to sweep across our culture. The final point is the one that confirms that I am an inveterate optimist, because although I show, and I think it's important we all understand, what happened to the country in the 60s and 70s as a direct result in many of the issues that we are dealing with in 21st century America. In Stumbling Toward Utopia, I show the timely, topical, relevant implications of the moral and social revolution on our era. I also believe strongly, as you will see in the book, that the best days for the United States of America are ahead of us. And by the way, this book was outlined, researched, and written long before the results of last November. But I believe very strongly that in a great country like the United States of America, we have had remarkably difficult chapters before, and we have come through. And I believe we are coming through better than ever. And in fact, I know there are a number of young people here this morning. I promise you, as sure as I'm standing here, I promise you, the best days of the United States of America are ahead of us. And I believe very strongly in the American dream. You know, when I travel to college campuses and am with the rising generation of young people, which I am almost a third of the time in my professional life, I actually make a point to ask young Americans, what kind of a country do you want? What's important to you? Overwhelmingly, they want to be married. They want to have families. They want to have children. They want to own a home. They want to go on vacation, you know? I mean, they want the right things. And of course, I'm generalizing. It's a big country of 350 million souls. You know, they're not bathed in ideology, right? And I believe very strongly that the thing that will take us forward is a spiritual revival of the first order. Because when you really understand the 1960s and 70s, what you ultimately come to the conclusion is that as devastating as these things are in public policy and politics, that ultimately, if a great nation wants an authoritative restoration, it is about things of the Spirit. And, you know, it's very difficult to say, when did France begin? What is France, you know? When did Germany begin? But we know when we began. We can even trace the date. We began on an afternoon of July 4th, 1776, you know? And we have a catechesis. It's the Declaration of Independence. And we have a way forward in this great nation. This country is eager to no longer stumble toward utopia. And I believe with all my heart, body, mind, and soul that we are already in the first stages of a measurable restoration. But I would argue strongly that as we move forward, it's very important to understand the past, to understand how we got into this mess, and then understanding how we got into the mess, how we can move forward toward restoration, renewal, regeneration, and the kind of American restoration that we want for our beloved constitutional republic. So Logan and Morton, at the expense of sermonizing or lecturing, I shall happily stop there and answer or duck a few questions. Thank you all very much. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
I'm Barbara Boone Whitman, and I came to this town in '64.
That's the year I was born. I was born the last year of the baby boom.
I'm well before the baby.
Okay.
At any rate, I lived through the '60s, and it was a horrible time.
Uh-huh.
People talk about how great the '60s and '70s were. They were not. You've given me a little encouragement toward what my mother always taught me, which is we always go too far in one direction before we swing back the other way. So I am happy to hear you think we have begun to swing back the other way.
Yes.
Because the '60s tore down everything I had been taught to believe as I grew up.
First, your mother was wise. And
I'll be 116 now, but
that's, yes, she would be older and wiser. I'm very pleased to, and I could answer this in a number of ways. We are making great movies again. We're making great music again. There's good television again. And in the moral, social, political realms, for instance, the pro-life movement, 52 years of a march. I've missed 3 in 35 years. It gets younger and larger every single year. And there are lots of other examples. I don't want to understate this. It's Barbara, yes? Yes. I don't want to understate this. This rising generation of young people, they are young, bright, and smart, and they are impatient for all the right things. They are not where their counterparts were in the 1960s and 70s. This is not the Woodstock or the new Woodstock generation. And I would even argue, Barbara, because I debate them, for a living, that the progressive left, what it's about or what the goal is.
That's a good thing.
It's a very good thing. I'm smiling like the Cheshire Cat. Yeah. But the only temperance I have is that I do not believe that politics ultimately can resolve the issues that we as conservatives care most about. It can ameliorate them. It can address them, right? And we have great conservatives in the political class at every single level. We really do. But I think as conservatives, we have to remember that it is figures who are really cultural figures, like Ronald Reagan, for instance, and there are many others who understood in their DNA that culture matters, right? And if you're going to make it new, preoccupy yourself at some level with the cultural tastemakers and the way forward. And I think we're doing that. Yeah.
Next question.
Yes, sir.
Wait for the mic. Thank you.
So, thank you for an excellent talk and about
You're welcome.
cultural leaders. I understand that when President Trump was young, his pastor was the Reverend Norman Vincent Peale.
Yes.
Author of Power of Positive Thinking.
Yes, indeed.
And I wonder if you could comment and if that could help people understand Mr. Trump and his optimism and his.
Yes. Yes, I'm thrilled to get that question. It was Scott Fitzgerald who said, as Americans, it's something in our DNA of what he called a willingness of the heart. And I think that there is in the American DNA the willingness of a heart that has welled itself up through the presidency of Donald Trump. People keep saying that he is the most unlikely person ever to become president. But I want to confirm something, and I don't know how closely people paid attention to the meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday. But I never thought that I would be quoting Benjamin Netanyahu at the Leadership Institute to answer your question about Donald Trump's potential optimism rooted in Norman Vincent Peale, okay? But here I go. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Israel made an observation about Donald Trump that I think is precisely the right one. In fact, I think it's the most insightful thing that has ever been said about President Trump. He said, did you ever notice, he said, I'm paraphrasing, that when Donald Trump recommends something, the first idea is people shake their head and say, that can't happen. And then they stop for a minute and they say, wait a minute, we've never thought about that. Why not? Okay? That echoes Andrew Jackson. That echoes Theodore Roosevelt. And frankly, that echoes Ronald Reagan. So this idea that just because it's not been tried before, right, or is being recommended by somebody outside the comfortable confines of the political class is something that I think we should negate. And I think it's important to look at people like Donald Trump who think about things way outside the box and imagine them in a way that we have not thought before. So I think Donald Trump is actually in a line of American optimism and broader thinking that I think only redounds to his and to our republic's benefit in this particular chapter of American public life.
We have time for one more question. Over here.
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Goeglein.
You're welcome.
I'm John Selmansberger. I'd like to hear you speak for a moment about LBJ and the destruction of the low-income and welfare family.
You've really honored me by asking about LBJ, because LBJ and the Great Society are one of the centerpieces, as you will see in Stumbling Toward Utopia. He gets a whole chapter. And I went back and I read every single one of the major speeches that Lyndon Baines Johnson gave on the Great Society, including when he launched the Great Society in 1964 in Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan. Now, you and I don't know each other, but if we knew each other for 500 years, I could regale you with the gargantuan, colossal promises that Lyndon Johnson made in the Great Society. Let me give you a very short, snappy list. Are you ready? The federal government, he said, was going to solve poverty. Did you know that? Yes. It was going to solve all the interurban problems of the United States. It was the Great Society government here in Washington was going to solve all of our education issues. The federal government was going to solve the issues of the American family. And it goes on and on from there. It's unbelievable. When you go through the series of speeches, news conferences, remarks, and availabilities that Lyndon Johnson did in propounding the Great Society, it is nothing short of jaw-dropping. And it's not just overreach, okay, but it is completely unconstitutional to have taken that much power, right, and to have said that we will use this much power to resolve all of these problems was destined to failure. And you will see in Stumbling Toward Utopia and by the way, I kept the book well under 200 pages, because I want people in Stumbling Toward Utopia is I show all of the rhetoric and the promises, and then all of the devastating reality. And I'll close on this note. In 1965, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who is a little-known demographer, went on to become a U.S. Senator, wrote a very important short report on the American black family. Now, this is 1965, okay? He found in 1965 that 25% of all black Americans were born out of wedlock. And he called it in 1965 a crisis. Here we are in 2025, and that number is 72%. 53% of all Hispanic Americans, 33% of all native-born white Americans, and the majority of babies born to 30 years of age and over, the majority of those babies are born now fatherless, out of wedlock, okay? So I think it's fair to say that the utopian social engineers who incentivized the destruction of the American family and incentivized the divorce of men from an active role in the raising of their children, that we can say that when the federal government incentivizes something, it gets a whole lot more of it. And I think Stumbling Toward Utopia demonstrates that we ought to go in a different direction. And the very happy news is that I believe, as Morton has pointed out just in the last 2 weeks, we all have whiplash, we're going in a different direction. Yeah. I hope you all read and love and share Stumbling Toward Utopia. And I look forward to inscribing copies to all those who want them. And I'm so grateful to the Leadership Institute, to Morton Blackwell, to his crack team, and to everybody. And thank you so much for spending part of your morning with me. God bless. And God bless America.
Isn't he a great speaker? He holds your attention terrifically. Terrific guy. I worked in Ronald Reagan's White House staff. It's been, as you know, for 3 years. Tim worked for almost 8 full years at the White House, And his job responsibility was rather closely analogous to the job that I had there. And he did a great job at the White House, and he's doing a great job building our movement. Let me present to you an Adam Smith tie.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Morton.
I invite you to join us on March 5th for our next Wednesday Wakeup Club breakfast. I encourage you to RSVP online at leadershipinstitute.org/breakfast. Now, Victor Castro. Victor, will you step up here? Here's Victor. Fine fellow, fine staffer. I invite anyone interested in a tour of our Stephen P.J. Wood building, which is here, and the Emerson and Dolores Wright Center for Campus Reform, a fine tour. Come up after we adjourn. He'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. And if you can't answer a tough question you might ask, he may pop up to my office and ask me. Maybe I can answer it. Thank you all for a wonderful breakfast, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you everyone for your attendance and for your support of the Leadership Institute. Thank you. Step up front.